Hey guys, welcome back. Today's guest is Dr. Bryna Chrismas, exercise physiologist, lecturer at Loughborough University, HYROX coach, and one of the leading voices in female athlete performance. Through her work in research, education, and coaching, Bryna helps athletes and coaches better understand the science behind training, performance, and female health. So we are super excited for this one after HYROX world champs and not managing to catch up with each other, but we know you had a big influence over there. So thank you for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks both. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today, chatting to you. And yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get to meet up face to face in Stockholm, but it was a very wild and energetic and brilliant few days over there.
I know it was awesome, wasn't it? I think everyone like looked like they had a fab time, and seeing everyone's socials after the event and updating has been really cool. Before we go down that route, could you just give for anyone listening that maybe doesn't follow you a little bit of background into like what you do and your profession, so people know who they're listening to?
Oh, and also your surname and why you're Christmas. We literally just talked about this before, and I feel like people will be wondering.
Yeah, yeah. So literally every time I ring up to like book a restaurant or like say my name for like registering something important, have to be like Christmas Day, but like without the T, and everyone just looks like, what do you mean like without the T? But it did used to be spelled as in Christmas Day, and then we did some family history, and in the 17th century, someone misspelt it on one of my ancestors' birth certificates, and they just forgot to put the T in it. I think it was really expensive to actually change birth certificates back then. So they just didn't end up changing it. So yeah, I've been forever Christmas without the tea.
Christmas without
I love that. It's such a cool story.
It's also like
It's just a
quite
cool surname.
yeah, a cool surname. But then for booking a restaurant or something, if you're close to like around about Christmas Day, people might think, oh, are you like, do you want it for the 22nd or do you want it for Christmas? Or like, what's going
I
on?
book it for Christmas. What's the name? Christmas. But didn't you say you wanted it for January?
Yeah, it used to be a real pain getting taxis for nights out because they're like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Like, sure, you want the taxi for Christmas. And then even in Stockholm, when someone said my name, they were like, oh, because it was a summer, like midsummer, wasn't it? And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, not quite Christmas yet. And I was like, no. And then we started having a conversation about imagine if my parents had called me Summer Christmas.
Oh my
It
God.
was very random.
Actually, it must be such a good conversation
It
starter.
is. Yeah, because I got married and I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm changing my name, by the way. Like, it's
That is too
the,
good.
What was there an
yeah.
option for double barrel?
I mean, yeah, we could have done, but I don't know that I just, unless it was something like Christmas pudding, I don't think
Oh
you
my
could double
God.
barrel
Yeah.
it.
Or cracker, Christmas cracker.
Yeah, or tree.
Oh, so
Imagine
good.
Christmas tree.
Imagine
Oh,
Christmas
hello.
tree.
Christmas tree. Yeah. Oh well, that's cool. I love that. I love that.
Now we've covered that, the
Yeah.
most important part of the podcast, you know. No, go on, give us an insight. Let us know a little bit more about you.
So professionally, I did an undergraduate degree in sport, health, and exercise science, and then a master's and a PhD in exercise physiology. That was post, or yeah, that was after I was an elite athlete. So I basically started running when I was 8 years old and then moved into race walking because randomly my coach went on some CPD one day, came back to the track and was like, oh, let's give race walking, a bit of a crack tonight. We'll have a bit of fun. And we were all like, what's this strange bum wiggling thing? And then there was randomly like an England GB coach at the track, and they were like, oh, actually, Bryna's like quite talented at this. I think she could be good. And I really wanted to be an 800-meter runner. Kelly Holmes was like my idol growing up, but I wasn't good enough. Like I was a pretty decent club athlete, but there was no way I was going to make it to the Olympics. So I was like, okay, I'll give race walking a go. And then ended up competing for Great Britain and training at Loughborough before, as you mentioned, I now work there. So there's kind of been this like full circle moment, which has been really cool. So I was always interested in athletes and particularly helping girls and women. But I guess throughout my undergrad, masters, and PhD back then, people just weren't really researching females. So I would ask like, why are we not recruiting females? And it was always, oh, they're too difficult because of the menstrual cycle, or it's too expensive, or females don't want to do this. But even in my undergrad dissertation, I was like, no, like I want to include female athletes. So although I didn't like specifically concentrate on like the menstrual cycle or pelvic floor health, like my PhD was actually looking at muscle damage and fatigue and recovery, and my master's was in environmental physiology. But I always brought females into that and wanted to understand if there were any like differences between how they responded. And if there weren't, then there was obviously no reason to separate them. So they're just kind of included as part of the sample. And then I went on to work in the UK for a number of years at a couple of different academic institutions. And then in 2015, I moved to Qatar, so in the Middle East, and I spent 8.5 years there as an associate professor. And obviously, very different culture. Males and females were taught separately, and a lot of my research then built on and expanded on environmental physiology, but also just trying to help girls and women to get into sport and to improve their health and performance. And then I started at Loughborough 2.5 years ago, and I've been really lucky over the last kind of 13 years or so to work with athletes from recreational up to the elite level, to support female athletes in their prep for Tokyo 2020 with like heat prep for rugby sevens in Australia. I've got a couple of PhD students at the moment. I know you're Scottish. Well, you're both based in Scotland, probably not both Scottish. I have one at Celtic doing a PhD in female health literacy and soccer, and then I've got a couple of other PhD students that also work with female athletes in different Olympic federations.
Oh, that's crazy. That's some resume.
Yeah.
Before we get into the really like interesting stuff with female health and the physiology and how you've got into HYROX and how this might help everyone that's listening, race walking, can we just touch on this? Like, what speeds are you getting up to? Because I've seen race walkers that can walk faster than people can run.
Yeah. So for actually a long time, my race walk PB was better than like my adult 5K PB. So I was walking at like around about 24 minutes for like a 5K, and like 50 minutes for a 10K. So yeah,
And you have to, you have to like heel straight before you put the next foot down or something? What's the rule?
Yeah, so when you make contact, when your lead leg makes contact with the ground, your knee must be straight. So you can't have like a bent knee. So for anyone that's not watching, I've kind of using my elbow at the minute, but yeah. So your knee has to be fully extended when your foot touches the ground. So obviously the easiest way to do that is to plant your heel, and then you sort of roll onto your foot, and then one part of your foot must maintain contact with the ground at all times, but that's to the human eye. So if you actually slow down race walkers, and we obviously did like video analysis, you do actually leave the ground.
Okay.
But it's
So
to the human
like
eye
HYROX.
judges. Yeah, it's like judging. You're
HYROX
pushing the boundaries with burpees. For sure. Yeah.
Oh my God. That is wild though. And then I know I'm going totally off topic, but how do you train for that? Do you train for it the same way you would train for running?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very the crossover from running to race walking is massive in terms of the capacities, because you're basically just building anaerobic and aerobic capacity plus all your strength for obviously strength and power and efficiency, but it is very technical. So mostly all race walkers can run really well, but not all runners can race walk, because if you can't get the technique and the efficiency, then you can find it a real challenge. But the first time I did it, my shins were literally on fire. I was like, oh, what is this? But yeah, you do get used to it. But people used to be like, oh, those that can't run, walk, and we used to get a lot of stick. You know, I'm from Yorkshire, and people are not very forgiving up north. They're very friendly, but also you definitely get a lot of funny looks and comments when you be out for like a long walk on a Sunday.
That is wild.
So cool though.
Imagine if we did like a HYROX where you had to race walk. That would
Yeah.
be wild, wouldn't it?
That would be hard.
Yeah, it would.
Like you say, it's like technical, like it's, I don't know, just trying to, I always
It
just
looks
think
technical as well.
yeah, it looks hard trying to like keep that speed, but like you say, but then make your legs straight. Like, gosh.
Yeah.
Do you still do it or?
No, I haven't. I used to teach it. So when I was in Qatar, we would, or I had a module that was basically athletics. So it was kind of track and field. So I would cover all of the disciplines, and obviously I would cover race walking. But yeah, that was the last time. So I haven't done it for a little while. Sometimes people just get me to do it.
Yeah, fair. And do you like go for a walk with mates, or does no one go for a walk with you now because you just like walk off? Because I used to always walk with my grandma, who like used to do loads of rambling. Honestly, she was like 70, she'd leave me for dead. She was so fast at walking. I feel like everyone's got a friend or a parent or a grandparent that's fast at walking. I feel like you'd be that person.
Yeah, I must admit I don't like people that walk slowly.
Oh, so good. I just wasn't expecting that at the start. There we go.
I love support.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the professional side, I guess. How have you now like brought all your experience and like what you've done, like crossing over into the HYROX space, and what is your plans with it?
Yeah, well, I was really fortunate. I think I first heard of HYROX while I was still in Qatar, and there was a couple in the Middle East. I think there was actually one in Doha, but I missed it. So when I came back to England, I was like, I'm definitely doing HYROX. This is right up my street because I've just always loved running. And then I did a bit of CrossFit before I moved to Qatar for a couple of years, and I've always liked strength. So I was like, right, I'm going to give it a go. So I did it October 24 in Birmingham with a friend, did the doubles first of all, and I literally just fell in love with it. I was like, new obsession, like HYROX. I fell in love more with it from Stockholm, but it's literally become my whole personality now. So I trained as an athlete and obviously got to understand, the sport and demands a little bit more. And then I saw what they were doing, of their plans, just like the inclusivity with the females and the different age groups and everything. And then through work at Loughborough and through just knowing some people in the space, basically got chatting to Piers and Ralph from the HYROX 365 Academy. So they basically look after all of the education and the science and the research aspect. I was fortunate enough to write the level 2 female athlete specific module, and then they invited me to the Coaches Summit. It's the first one that was held in Twickenham in March earlier this year, just after the London Olympia event. And that was just such a fantastic experience and an event again. And then I was recently appointed to the Sports Science Advisory Council. So there are a number of us on that council, including Piers and Ralph and Mintra, who obviously designed HYROX, plus Anthony Pericini, coach of Lauren Weeks and some of the other elite athletes, and then a few other academics. So there's Gomar, Adam and Phil, and they're from different disciplines within sports science.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And what does that like involve, like from your side?
Yeah. So we're basically working together across all of the different relevant teams. So you've got like the sports teams, you've got, Matlock and everybody who's on the HYROX floor that looks after the athletes, that looks after the rules, the regulations, the policies, the sort of day-to-day of the events. And then you've got like medical teams as well. So obviously Stockholm was pretty warm. And I was actually talking about the heat and humidity alongside Adam and Anthony. We did like a session while we were in Stockholm. And there's been, numerous different HYROX venues and events that have exceeded, really warm temperatures, just like every sport. And obviously we're experiencing the heat wave at the moment in the UK and other parts of the globe. So the team obviously know that making sure athletes are safe, obviously their health and safety is the priority, but also, looking at performance across the adaptive categories, and then obviously the young stars and future is going to be one of the priorities. So we were kind of presenting to the coaches, to the teams. We were meeting together as a collective, and we're really trying to make sure that the coach education pathways, so you've got your individual coach education for like one-to-one coaching in HYROX, but then you'll have more of like the group classes, like the group situation. You'll obviously have coaches that are going to do the level 1, the level 2, and then any future education that HYROX might offer. And maybe people will specialise in the adaptive athlete or the female athlete or the masters athlete or the young star. So it's about us coming together as a collective and ensuring that, one, coaches have the most up-to-date knowledge and expertise in order to, coach your everyday athlete, someone that just wants to do HYROX for fun, all the way up to an elite, and that we're constantly updating that coach education with the most up-to-date research that's coming out. But it's also about characterising the demands of the sport, because obviously HYROX is a brand new sport, and yes, it is running, and yes, it's got rowing, and yes, it's got, strength and power movements within it, and we've got research from other sports. But ultimately, if we want to ensure we're providing the best coaching, but also the best athlete care, then we need to really characterise and understand the demands of the sport and the event. And then we can look at partnering with gyms, with coaches, with other universities across the globe to try and help improve the health and performance of all the athletes within HYROX. So it's about that research strategy, the education, and joining everything up and working with the existing structures within HYROX to make sure, whether it's training or race day, that everyone gets the best experience and that we're really pushing the sport forward with the best innovation to improve health and performance of everybody.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So what did you think about Stockholm and the heat? Because we were in the warm-up area and I didn't even start to warm up and we were just dripping in sweat. What was the thoughts around that weekend? And I know they were talking about doing temperature controlled venues and trying to keep the temperature the same everywhere, especially for things like the sled lanes, to make sure that there's humidity. And was there any talk wider than just the athletes saying we were
sweating?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess it's not just about the athletes as well. You think, like, I was worried about Faisal's core temperature, like the amount, and the other MCs, the judges, they're there for a lot longer often.
They do like
than
8-hour shifts, don't they?
Yeah. And you're running around, that energy, maybe a little bit dehydrated because you don't want to take breaks because needing to go to the bathroom. You've got all of the judges, you've got the volunteers, you've got the spectators, and we see across numerous different sports, whether it's tennis or golf, or even soccer and like the FIFA cooling breaks that's going on at the moment, that it's about everybody that's involved. And as you said, like, HYROX has some indoor and outdoor venues, doesn't it? So if it's like a Berlin or a New York where you are going to go outside, that's obviously more difficult to control. But we can learn from and look at other sports, and lots of other sports have like cut-offs, or something we call the wet bulb globe temperature. So it was actually cooler outside the venue in Stockholm than it was inside, right? Because it's not just about temperature. So, obviously people look at their phones and their apps and they go, oh, it's really hot, I'm not going to exercise outside today. And then they might go to an indoor, very sweaty gym that's got no AC, that doesn't have any windows, and you're surrounded by 50 other people and lots of lights and other equipment. So that's why we need to take another three things into account, which is airflow, radiation, which can come from the sun, but also can come from equipment, floors, other people, and the humidity as well. Because as you said, the problem is once you get to that point where there's too much water in the air around you, the sweat has nowhere to go. And as humans, we're super inefficient. So whenever we do any exercise and we start to work and produce energy, 70 to 80% of that is just heat. We're literally we just produce heat. We're really hot people. Only 20 to 30% goes into the energy. So our body goes, okay, I need to maintain my core temperature at about 37.5. And the best way to do that is to sweat. So it sends blood to the skin, not to your muscles, which makes the exercise much harder. So it's harder to get a personal best, so your performance is impaired. And then once the sweat is like on your skin, it needs to be able to evaporate in order to cool you. But if there's loads of water vapor, which you obviously can't see, in the air around you, it's got nowhere to go. So it just sticks on your skin and then just drips off, and you're basically just like cooking, like you're just like a sweating rotisserie chicken, which obviously isn't fantastic. So sometimes it can be worse inside, even though you think, oh, the temperature might be a little bit lower or similar, because you need the airflow. You've got to consider radiation. So yeah, it's 100% on HYROX in terms of their agenda and looking at how they can protect and ensure that everyone has the best experience, whether you're an athlete or a volunteer. And there's things that we can do, like if you want to talk about strategies, that there's like in other sports, we see people using ice vests, and there was a bit, I watched the YouTube stream because I always like listening to Lauren and Greg and everyone afterwards, and they were talking a little bit about free cooling, but I haven't really seen in the warm-up area anyone use like ice vests or ice cold towels to help cool them down. But the best thing would be to have it in a temperature controlled environment like Warsaw, because we know from the endurance research the optimal temperature for a runner, like a marathon runner, would be somewhere around about 7 to 14 to 15 degrees. So when they did like the Breaking 2 project, they wanted it about 8 degrees Celsius. But the marathon was broken recently in London. I think it was about 11 or 12 degrees Celsius then.
Interesting. It's like, I mean, I think everyone knows that like temperature has an effect on performance, but it's also just what you can do to help yourself to cool. I mean, we've been in the Middle East in Dubai the last year and probably been training in the heat a lot, and a lot of people were drinking like electrolyte slushies to like cool their core temperature down, like from the inside before they train. And we were like, why is everyone drinking these slush puppies, like so 90s? Until I realized why they were doing it, and I was like, oh, fair. And yeah, there's a lot of people with the crystallized headbands. I think Jake Dearden used to wear them, like Red Bull had them out for a bit, but I don't think he was wearing one for the actual. And Ida, she used to wear one, but I didn't see none of the elites were wearing them. And did you know whether they were doing like pre-calling or anything? Was anyone?
Yeah, there was a little bit. I didn't get to speak to any of them to ask. Only on the YouTube, I think they said that that they saw in the warm-up area they were maybe doing a little bit of it. But as you said, like it's so funny to me, because obviously the best thing is to wear as little clothing as possible, because
Which is
even
not a
though
problem in HYROX.
exactly, it's like this is why your shirt off is actually a good thing. Because any breathable fabric is still a barrier and it's still going to trap heat. So the most efficient thing is to just have your skin up. So like the guys will obviously like take their tops off, but then they'll like, stick a hat on, and I'm like, it's definitely
So
like.
Do they do that to I don't know, part of me was like, are they doing it to stop the sweat going in their eyes? Or like some of them are probably doing it because it's got sponsors on them. Like, would it be better to wear a headband? I don't know.
I mean, I'd definitely swap it out for one of the Red Bull headbands that they get, because there's been one study on those Omnion or Omnio, I always forget the name of the one. Yeah, they looked at like the forehead temperature, and there was a slight change in the skin temperature, but it's more of like a perceptive thing, really. And obviously in HYROX, like you can't douse yourself in water. Like when we're working with race walkers or marathon runners, like at the Doha 2019 athletics championships, they would literally collect towels, the race walkers, and then they'd have those like hats, and they would fill the hat up with ice and then plonk the hat on their head and then have the iced towel around their neck. And similar in tennis, because you've got the break, so you can obviously do that. So I kind of joked that, when Hunter and everyone slowed down because they didn't want to go, I was like, maybe you could just have like a break and let like everyone catch up and have like a cooling break where everyone's just stood there like with ice on, and then you could just like go again. But I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure if they'd be keen for that.
I'd be keen for that. I think most people would be keen for a break. One thing I was wondering was, because so cooling from the head, I get that, but is it not better to cool from the back of your neck? Like a lot of elite ultra runners wear like kind of like neckerchief stuff, like tie ice around their neck. Is that more effective, or is it your head? Where's the best place to cool yourself down?
Yeah, so head, neck, and face, those three areas are generally the best because your hypothalamus in your brain, your temperature regulation, so it's as close to that as possible. But if we're looking at, if you're literally stopping, like in soccer or in tennis, get as big a towel as possible and literally wrap it around you and cool your whole torso and body. You want to cover as much surface area as possible. So you could literally sit down and put large ice towels around your whole body and your legs and your head and your neck. But if, it's logistics and you're actually having to move while you're doing it, like in running or race walking, it's obviously not feasible to have a massive towel around you. It's going to affect your performance. Then I would go for head, face, or neck, any one of those three.
And does HYROX, from your experience, have a cutoff for like heat? Is there like do they do a wet bulb test and be like, would they be like, no, we can't? If for example Stockholm had got even hotter, would there have been a limit and they'd have said, we're not doing any racing?
Yeah, they do have cut-offs, and I think it works differently depending on the location.
Okay.
And what team it is. So whether it's like, an Aussie medical team, or if you're in the States, I think they have slightly different policies, rules, and regulations, and how they operate and work from like a athlete health and medical perspective. So I think that's something that they're obviously looking at across the different venues, because obviously in like Australia and America, it generally, depending on where you are, tends to be a little bit hotter. Like it was quite unseasonal, wasn't it? But I think I remember speaking to some people in Stockholm, and they were like, it's usually raining when it's midsummer. Like it just happened to be a heat wave. But yeah, that's definitely a consideration to have a cut off to postpone or to do it at a different time or date.
Interesting. And then what about like female athletes, like training and performance, like anything down that route that you feel passionate about or think that it's important to talk about, or you would want listeners to know as a female athlete training for HYROX and competing at a high level?
Yeah, I had a really nice podcast and chat with Mintra when I was there, and then obviously from doing like the level 2 on the female athlete. I just think that there's so many myths out there, and social media just, I think, is creating a lot of fear. And there's a lot of like doom and gloom around things like menstrual cycles, pelvic floor, pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause. And it's like this marketing tactic that I just really don't like. And I was speaking to somebody the other day who works in pregnancy and pelvic floor, and she was saying how harmful it is that even if your intention is to kind of educate and help women, if you're starting with some kind of fear-based hook to like get people in, like, this is sabotaging, female HYROX athletes, this is sabotaging your performance, or, you're making these massive big mistakes doing this, or none of the science is done on females, you need to train a completely different way. It's like people are cherry picking kind of half truths and headlines because they know it's going to lure women in. But like one of the big kind of misrepresentations maybe around that like 6% that we see everywhere. So you probably hear only 6% of research is done on females in sports science. Emma Cowley and the authors of that paper, that was one of the statistics they reported, but it was exclusively on females. So they looked at 6 different journals, and there's like 100 odd journals in sports science. So they took 6 of them, and they actually showed across all participants 34% were female, but it was the 6% where it was a study that only recruited females, right? So it's kind of like a half truth, because then people think, oh my gosh, that means that 94% of research is on men, which it isn't. And then there was an updated review a few years later after Emma's paper and her co-authors, And they looked at 3 papers, so even less, but they showed 43% of the research included female participants. And now people have taken that and they've taken study that's been done on rats. And, you know, I joked again at like the HYROX conference that, I mean, I don't have a tail, like I'm definitely not a rat. And so why are we using rodent studies and like misleading women when research has been done on rodents to say this is true for, you know, female athletes that train? And then the other thing is, you know, we could get females to come into the lab, you know, a laboratory at a university, or we can test them in like a HYROX gym environment, and we can take some bloods and we can, you know, look at some measurements and we can measure sex hormones. And there might be like a change, there might be like an increase or a decrease in something, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because we have some kind of physiological difference, and we can say, you know, obviously females have estrogen, males have more testosterone, females generally have more body fat percentage, and, you know, maybe different fiber type distribution. But just because something exists on like a scientific level doesn't mean that when it comes to training and like adaptation and exercise and sport, that has any impact on how females respond. So when we actually look at the research, whether it is menstrual cycles or whether it's perimenopause and menopause, we like, from a training perspective, like the nuts and bolts of it, we don't have to do anything different. You know, as long as we're following progressive periodized research, we actually respond in a very similar way, whether we're in our follicular phase, whether we're perimenopausal or whether we're menopausal. But I think that's when females then say, but I notice differences around my menstrual cycle, or but I notice differences during perimenopause. Yes, females are experiencing symptoms or could potentially experience some symptoms like bloating, breast pain, fatigue, nausea, or they might have something like premenstrual dysphoric disorder or endometriosis. And those females could experience some horrific symptoms, which of course, if you're just saying, well, just train normally, you know, it's all right, there's no difference. Like, obviously, those females are experiencing that. Just like the same with, you know, perimenopause, hot flashes, night sweats, poor sleep, changes in mood, you know, forgetfulness, all these things. Again, if you just turn around to a woman and say, no, you're fine, you know, we don't need to consider any of that. Like, obviously, you're just gaslighting them. Like, for sure, you need to like understand and maybe adapt to females. Same with pregnancy. But I think there's a lot of fear, and people mistake some of those more like contextual factors around symptoms for needing to actually change how you train.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so would you prescribe a training plan based on the outcome or the sport, and then modify for the individual based on like for females if they suffered from any symptoms and how severe it was at the time? Or
yeah, exactly. I think it's like coach the individual just as you would do a male athlete. But I think one thing, you know, when I'm working with an athlete, one thing that's really important to me is that like psychological and emotional safety. Because, you know, I do think there are obviously differences in life phases between male and female athletes. And of course, a male athlete needs to feel psychologically and emotionally safe because they could have things that they need to talk about with their coach and raise. But I think the important thing, as you say, is you prescribe the plan based on where they're at, you know, their injury history, their goals, what do they want to achieve, what's their current training. So you do your best in planning that training for HYROX, but you also make sure that you are asking questions about their menstrual cycle, their pelvic floor health. You know, are they leaking? Do they have like urge incontinence when they get back from a run or during burpees? Are they noticing, oh, you know, I really need to go to the bathroom? Are they wearing the right sports bra? And that should be spoken about, just like looking at the latest, you know, pair of HYROX trainers. Are they experiencing any perimenopausal symptoms? You know, are they thinking about conceiving? What's their nutrition like? You know, looking for relative energy deficiency in sport, red flags. So, you know, as a coach, I think it's about, obviously we don't want to bombard people with loads of questions, but there are a lot of screening tools and quick questions and things that we can include in our daily like monitoring or within our check-ins or when we're speaking to our athletes or onboarding them, that just captures a lot of those potential factors and symptoms that might then need adapting or modifying, because it might not be that actually they have a symptom that disrupts their training. It might be that, okay, they've lost their menstrual cycle, or we might be worried that they're suffering from relative energy deficiency in sport, or we might be worried that they're at risk of, you know, an eating disorder.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really interesting, and I think there, like you say, there's so many different like avenues and parts to cover and like bits to look at, like as a female athlete. Is there anything that you would say like I know it's hard as like a generalization because everyone's different and people have different symptoms and go through different things, but that you would say like as a female it would be good to focus on, whether it's like, I don't know, your sleep or taking certain supplements or doing something at a certain time of your cycle? Or is there any like, I don't know, little like top tips or takeaways or things that you could kind of give to our listeners?
Yeah, I definitely think obviously the fundamentals around sleep and nutrition are so important, but I guess from like a female specific way, a couple of like take homes or helpful things for listeners might be, you know, I've worked with a few athletes who say, I know and I understand how much energy I need, you know, to fuel correctly for the exercise I'm doing for HYROX, for my training, for my recovery, and just for daily life. And I'm like, okay, but they're like, but actually, you know, I've not had a menstrual cycle for 6 months. Like, well, there's a mismatch there then, unless you're pregnant or unless there's another medical reason that would explain that absence of your menstrual cycle, then it's probably, I'm not a medical doctor, and obviously I would, it's out of my scope of practice, I would refer them, but I'd say it's probably an energy, you know, chronic, problematic, low energy availability. And I think a lot of female athletes maybe don't appreciate and realise that there can be quite a bit of difference in like sensitivity, you know, so like, you know, me, Emma, you know, Faye, we might all have similar energy requirements and similar energy output, but one of us might just be quite sensitive to like a reduction in energy availability or like throughout the day. Yeah.
We can definitely see that between us two. It's so different.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you might be like, but you know, I'm eating more than, you know, whoever, or I seem to be eating the same, but actually your threshold, and there's other things to consider, you know, around stress and other things going on in your life, but you just might genetically be a little bit more sensitive, and maybe you need like more regular meals, or maybe you need like slightly higher carbohydrate. So a lot of the athletes I work with are like, well, yeah, but I'm eating enough. I'm like, yeah, but you're having a banana before your 2 hour, you know, HYROX training session. Then you're kind of having a bit of salad, and then you're having like your main meal, like you're almost saving your calories and having like a good, you know, protein, fats at the end of the day. And I'm like, you've got like a within day energy deficit, and like maybe for you just need a little bit more. And like people think, oh, but I'm not doing like a really long 2 hour session, so I don't need carbohydrate during my session. But maybe you do, like maybe you just need, you know, 30 grams of carbohydrate or just a few pairs of picks just to help you, you know, get through that. So I think that is really important, like knowing and understanding, and it's a bit of trial and error, that if something is off and, you know, you're not getting your cycle, just because someone else might seem to be okay at doing what you're doing, that for you, it might be that you just need to eat really regularly and almost have like, you know, not much of a gap between food, like either be constantly sort of snacking, or having a meal, and then making sure you're definitely getting enough carbohydrate for sure. And then I think the second thing would be around iron. HYROX is a lot of running. I don't think people realise that you are literally, every time you run, the impact, you're killing, like swashing red blood cells. So you're damaging the iron in your body's ability with the hemoglobin and the heme of the iron. And then we obviously have a menstrual cycle. I don't think a lot of females know what heavy menstrual bleeding is and understand that that's quite a lot of blood loss, particularly around perimenopause. Or there could be changes, from when you first get your cycle through to menopause, and you might need to adjust. I also don't think people know that when you exercise, your body's ability to absorb iron is reduced. So like for 3 to 6 hours afterwards. So the best time to take iron is usually like 30 minutes before exercising, because otherwise you get an increase in hepcidin, which actually blocks your ability to absorb the iron as well.
Yeah, interesting. And you should take it with vitamin C and not around caffeine as well. Is there anything else that?
Yeah, really heavy, what they call like I always forget the name, but basically oats and nuts as well.
Oh,
so
really?
if you're taking quite large quantities, like overnight oats, a lot of people eat, don't they? But yeah, quite large quantities of oats and nuts can also block it. But yeah, as you said, take it with vitamin C. And again, I was speaking to a female athlete who had got an iron supplementation, because obviously food first is always the best approach. So meats are the best source, of iron, but you do have tofu and green leafy vegetables and beans and lentils, which provide iron as well for those who might be vegetarian or don't eat much meat. But she didn't realise, because she was using supplementation, that the dose on the packet isn't the amount of available iron. So you might get an iron supplement that you've ordered and it might say 100 milligrams, but that's not the available, we call it elemental iron. So like in some supplements, depending on which one, it might say 100 milligrams of iron, but actually the available elemental iron is 60 milligrams. So a lot of people recommend about 100 milligram dose. It does depend, and you need to play around a bit, because some people can be very sensitive to it. So you might have to take it like every other day, rather than every day, because it can cause a GI discomfort in some individuals.
Yeah, and we had I can't remember where it was now, but this one of the girls, she was an athlete and she was struggling to absorb the iron, just with like obviously trying to fuel her training and and she used to take it in the middle of the night, because she'd get up, she wouldn't be eating anything, she'd go back to sleep, and if she woke up in the middle of the night, she'd take some vitamin C and know that she didn't take it around anything. And I was like, oh, that was interesting. Just little, I don't know whether that's a thing, or I just feel like if you're like low on iron and you're always eating and you're like, don't eat it around this, don't have it around caffeine, don't do it around training, like there is a very limited time to try and take that iron and try and absorb it without the rest of everything. Yeah, with everything else in the day. I think it's like really hard to know what's the right thing to do, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, like that could be a good way to do it, depending on if you wake up during the night, obviously don't want to disrupt sleep too much.
But then also everyone's like, yeah, don't disrupt your sleep. So I don't know.
Can't win, can you?
No.
But yeah, always measuring is like really important as well. Like the recommendation is like once a year, really, for athletes. But if you're worried about somebody or they've had low iron before, then it's 3 to 6 months. But I have a lot of athletes that go and get their iron tested, but again, they've done it around training, and then there's an increase in inflammatory markers in your blood, and then they can artificially inflate your ferritin. So you might come back with a ferritin reading that looks okay, and then a doctor might also use the clinical guidelines changed last year from like 15 to 30, but from like an athletic perspective, really you want to be about 50 for your ferritin. So yeah, there can be lots of considerations around going to see your doctor, what type of test to get, and So it's always good if you can try and speak to a sports medical doctor, but they are few and far between, and I appreciate that's a bit of an expense.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you, really useful information. And then I'm not sure if like this is anything you've done or looked into before, but like the mental side of things, and in particular with like females, I don't know, we hear a lot about like women having really like strong mental strength, being resilient, and kind of almost having that like extra little edge with the pain barrier and being able to push through. Is that anything you've ever like looked into before, or have any like info on or insight into?
Yeah, I've generally not focused on the kind of psychological aspects as much. I've done some of like the perceptual stuff. So yeah, how women or female athletes feel, like what's their like mood. But I did for my PhD, I did look at pain. So we did like a pain like threshold test after a muscle damaging exercise. So I basically had to like push as hard as I could with this like metal object into people's thighs. I mean, that sounds absolutely horrific. And then I basically attached electrodes to them in this chair that looked a little bit like a torture chair, and it sent an electrical impulse to their leg, and basically contracted their leg for them. So they didn't have to contract. So it was that strong of like an electrical impulse that their whole like quadriceps would contract, and then it would like produce force, because I wanted to see what the difference was. So I guess I have done some of this research. I wanted to see what the difference was between their ability to motivate themselves to contract. So if I asked you, like on a hand grip dynamometer, have you ever used one of those? Yeah. So if I asked you to squeeze like the hand grip dynamometer like as hard as you could, like what's your ability to send that message to your brain to like squeeze it? So I was looking at that kind of effect, but in the legs, in the quadriceps in particular, following really hard muscle damaging exercise where you're in pain and you've got a lot of muscle damage from eccentric exercise. I want to see that voluntary ability to do that versus what the muscle could actually do, bypassing the brain, which is why we put the electrodes directly onto the muscles. And we didn't see any, a delightful study.
Who did you get to do this study?
University students.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Free meal deal.
Yeah. They got a voucher for doing it. And I did it myself. I would never get anybody to do anything. I did all of the testing on myself to trial it beforehand. So I definitely knew what they were going through and the pain. So I was appreciative of it. But there were no differences in my study between the males and females. But I have had some colleagues that have looked at like fatigability, so your ability to contract muscles, and there has been some research that's shown that females, that their like drop in strength is less, so they actually might be a little bit more resilient to that kind of repeated fatiguing exercise.
That is crazy. Is there a difference between that you've noticed, or has anyone noticed it, between what makes an elite athlete and a very good athlete? Like, is it their ability to suffer? Is it their ability? Is it the psychological? Is it that I know it's probably different with different people, because some people are just physiologically gifted or genetically gifted. Is that on a whole like something that separates somebody becoming elite versus becoming, like, I saw someone say like you have to be really bloody good to be an average HYROX there right now, like you have to be really quite fit to be average at HYROX.
Yeah, there was a paper that was published quite a few years ago, and I can't remember the exact title, but it was basically like, are elite athletes like narcissists?
Yeah,
like
a little bit, isn't it? It's like, what is it?
Yeah, which you do get like the best of the very best. And there has been some research looking at like their brain and almost how selfish that they can be, and like very much like purely focused on their goal. But that's not saying, I'm not saying every elite athlete's a narcissist and super selfish, because obviously that's not true. And you obviously get very kind, empathetic, caring elite athletes as well. But yeah, there certainly is something. And again, there was another paper published that looked at like the determinants of endurance performance, because previously we thought it was just like VO2 max, running economy, lactate threshold. But they've also looked at something called resilience, and kind of you could have two athletes that are very similar, but if you kind of imagine a battery, and you've got the start of the HYROX race and you're like 100%, and then by the end on the wall balls, you've got like your battery, and it's kind of like how much is that person faded? And you can get that from like a physiological perspective in terms of resilience. But absolutely, like, I've worked with athletes and I know there's been research that's been done, and they could be from a physiological perspective, like, the best of the best, like super talented and got what it takes, but psychologically and mentally they don't. So it really is about that full package. And I think the key take home is that that's trainable. Both the physical and mental and psychological qualities are trainable. But I think that, and I'm sure you and listeners, like, I was running today in the heat and I was doing 500 reps. And there was a part of me that could have just slowed down. But it's in that moment where you go, am I going to slow down or am I not? And like, how much can I suffer through the feeling in my legs and the feeling in my chest and how hot it was to really, push into that like deep, dark hole. And I think at whatever level, whether you are recreational or elite, I think you need that ability, you need that skill, and it absolutely is trainable. But like everything, there also is a genetic component to it.
Yeah. It is interesting. It is so interesting.
And then can I just ask one more question before I ask the questions around it? But like, what do you think makes like the best HYROX athlete? What's the makeup in your opinion? What like background, or like do they have to be tall? Do they have to be a fast? Is it better to be a better runner? I mean, could argue yes after seeing Alyssa in Stockholm. What's in your opinion as an exercise physiologist is the ideal HYROX athlete?
We literally got asked this when we were in Stockholm from one of the
did
coaches.
you?
Yeah, in one of the sessions, and we all had like different answers. I 100% think the running background, or at least the endurance background, because as you said, if you look at Alyssa, if you look at Dylan, he's an NCAA runner as well, isn't he? Luke, Saskia and Holly obviously weren't in there. But you look at the percentage of the race that's taken up by running. Running and your endurance capacity is hugely important. However, you need that ability to be able to run under fatigue, which is a different skill to just being a runner. And I think maybe somebody like a rugby sevens athlete that was my answer, who's like really aerobically fit, a good runner, like efficient, but has that ability from that high speed, like anaerobic perspective, and is strong and is used to that kind of tackle, that like pain threshold aspect. So I'd quite like to see a rugby sevens athlete in HYROX and see if we could give some of the runners a run for the money. What do you two think?
I don't know. I honestly think it's so hard. I do think the endurance, I feel like anyone kind of with the Ironman, marathon,
Swimmers, a lot of swimmers.
Yeah, something like that. Aerobic capacity is kind of naturally, I guess, doing well, maybe because the strength side is not necessarily easier to build, but like quicker. It's generally a bit of a quicker process to improve on that, as opposed to improving on your aerobic capacity and that, like, or that top end run speed. So I feel like
I think it would have been interesting if there was something in HYROX that was more upper body, because I think like if you're a good runner, they do have quite good leg strength, glute strength, like so the sleds and things like that. And I think if the sled pull had been how Mintra had expected it, which was upper body, and not to turn it into almost a leg exercise where everyone's walking backwards. I think it would have been really interesting to see the change in an athlete in HYROX if you had to do a sled pull using your upper body, because then I think it would have been a different style of athlete.
Yeah, agreed. Because most of the stuff's aerobic, isn't it? Like even the lunges and the burpees, it's low.
Yeah, even being able to carry on in the wall balls, it's like it does get you in the end, like, in your. It's also kind of, it's such an interest. I mean, it's so varied right now. I just wonder what it would be in the future, but I guess we'd just probably have athletes that in the future are just HYROX athletes, because with the young stars, they're just coming in as HYROX athletes from the start. So yeah,
exactly.
Is there anything we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about, or a like topic or a message we've not covered before we round up?
I don't think so. Like, I could obviously speak for hours about like HYROX and female athletes and like pregnancy. Like, honestly, the fact that they're what's the doctor? I've forgotten her name.
Atalanta.
Like how incredible that she was, elite 15, there, pregnant. Like, I just thought it was like, aren't women amazing? And that ability to be able to do it. And Lauren and others have done it before, haven't they? She's definitely not the first. But I think, I just think HYROX can really be that inclusive sport for everyone, no matter who you are or where you are in whatever phase of life. And actually, I got in a taxi with someone to the party on whatever day it was, Sunday, was it the party? Sunday, and I was chatting to her, and you're like, oh, so have you done the HYROX? And she was like, oh, she went to go and do one, and she almost like panicked, like just got really anxious, and it's like, no, I'm not good enough, like this isn't for me. And I guess just for anybody listening who might not have done a HYROX or might be sort of comparing themselves to the elites, like, it really doesn't matter if it takes you 50 minutes or 3 hours. Like, it's about moving your body, being around good people, being part of the community. And if you want to, challenging yourself, or it's just about doing it with your mum or your friend and going having a good time and having a bit of a dance, on the ski erg. Like, honestly, nobody cares. Like, no one's looking at you. Like, we're all just in a hole or enjoying ourselves, and it's just the best community. So
yeah, it is, isn't it? And I think a lot of the time everyone looks on Instagram and sees all these. I mean, this is what we get. We get like, oh, yeah, but you just see everyone with their six packs and their tops off. And it's like, actually, if you go to an event, if you actually go to a HYROX race, it isn't like that at all. Take world champs out of it, because that probably was. But at your standard HYROX event, like, that's a very small percentage of people are standing there with like ripped six packs, and like most people are just your average gym goer that's done an event that actually works really well for going to a gym and doing a bit of strength and a bit of endurance and a bit of running. It's like, I think it's the reason it's taken off so much, is because it is such an event for everybody, and the community is just an incredible community and very supportive.
Yeah, everyone's so friendly, from the volunteers to the athlete, the elite athletes, to no matter who you meet. I think it's such a friendly space, and people are willing to, like, help, and they've got your back, and you always have a chat with someone, won't you, in the bathroom or on the start line or in the warm-up area.
Yeah, 100%. And what does the next season look like for you then, like going forward, like, but both personally in your racing or your sporting side, but also professionally working with HYROX, and maybe anything you're doing with female athletes, or with providing more information on female health?
Yeah, personally, I've signed up to HYROX Rome, so that is
end
of September. Not been to Rome before, so I was like, good way to travel and do a HYROX.
Yeah, definitely.
At the same time, so I'm excited that I'm going to do the open solo there, and a friend is going to come and do the open solo as well, and then we're going to plan, hopefully, to do Dublin together in the pro doubles. So that'll be my first time stepping up to pro, so I've just started training at pro weights now.
Awesome. And how do you find the difference between open and pro?
Do you know, not too bad. The only thing is the wall balls, because
Yeah.
that I've got a massive area for improvement with the wall balls. I'm a typical runner, like I do everything that, you know, the sagittal plane. I've got absolutely no like I'm like Luke Greer and Saskia, like, you know, on the wall ball, just yeah. So I'm working on that. So that's definitely a bit of a step up for me onto the 6. But yeah, I've got a plan in place to help
And
with
you do
that.
the
But
doubles, which is quite nice.
exactly.
Like you
Yeah.
can break it up and support each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually used to race walk with her. So it's quite fun that now we're going to do a HYROX together, which
Oh, that'll be awesome.
is quite cool. Yeah. And
And
then work wise,
yeah.
yeah, continuing working Sports Science Advisory Council, so getting some studies underway. So we'll be looking at data collection, both with the team, with the HYROX team, but then also me, you know, personally, just through my job and my role and my research to, you know, I really want to access and get some surveys, get some questionnaires, get some data collected from current female HYROX athletes. So yeah, I'll obviously let you know when the studies come out, and if you or, you know, our listeners or people you know would be interested, because yeah, I'd really like to understand some of the barriers and challenges of female HYROX athletes and how we can help support them from, you know, training, performance and recovery.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, wow. I mean, it's really exciting that it's even a thing, that female health is becoming a topic and an interest, and HYROX are investing in it. And there's people like yourselves that are well educated, that are leading the way in female health and performance in the sport specifically as well for HYROX.
Yeah, I think from, you know, from day one, they've just been, you know, they know how important it is, and as you said, they just really want to support all of their athletes, you know, alongside the young stars and adaptive and masters. But yeah, female athlete is massively on their agenda, and that really showed at the coaches summit, because so many people came, you know, and were asking questions. And what was really nice was there was a lot of male coaches as well, and they came up to me afterwards and they were like, you know, how can I approach this? Or, you know, I've started talking about this. I know that pelvic floor health and menopause and pregnancy are important for my female athletes, and I really want to support them. So I think it's really good that, you know, it's not just females, like it's getting everybody and part of the community involved. And, you know, just said they really want to, from, because a lot of these girls, you know, like I was saying, you could be in the Red Bull start tunnel and you might have your very first period.
Yeah.
And like what, how are you going to do? Yeah. And I remember being an athlete when I was young, and you just didn't speak about it. It was just like a massive taboo. But if from day one they know, oh yeah, I can talk about my period with the HYROX team, or, you know, the HYROX coaches, it's there and it's already in the education, people will just start to normalize it a lot more. Just think how many girls will stop from dropping out of sport, because you are talking about puberty and, like, you know, breast development and wearing a sports bra and how your body changes. These are like really big factors around that age range. So if you know, HYROX are already talking about it with their coaches and their athletes, and as part of, you know, just like the ecosystem, then hopefully girls feel really seen and heard, and then they're not going to end up dropping out of sport.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's incredible. And I think, like, even I guess it has always been it's been a taboo, but also I think a lot of coaches have also seen that females like losing their period and as a just it happens with performance, as in that's something that just happens when it absolutely shouldn't happen. But it's almost been seen as like, oh, when you become a high performing athlete as a female, that just happens, and or, you know, you go on the pill to stop it, or it's become a thing, rather than looking at it as an indication of health for females. So changing that narrative, I think, in a new sport, hopefully, and the girls coming through is such a healthy way, yeah, to look at things, and having people like you like leading that is incredible. I think it's absolutely incredible. So I mean, that probably brings us on to our final question, which is, what advice would you have given your younger self or the next generation of girls coming through? And I'm sure you've got some good advice. So.
thought about this a lot, probably too hard. Like, I'm not one of those people that thinks about things like the nth degree. I think it's like the researcher and scientist in me. And I was like,
Yeah.
thinking it, like overthinking it. And then I was like, right, just need to chill out. So I'm going to go for something different, because I was like, I'm not going to use my head and intellectualize it. I'm going to think about like my gut reaction to this. And that would be that either myself or maybe another younger female maybe doesn't need advice, but maybe just needs someone there to listen to them. So like I think for me personally, and just being around when I was a coach, I coached quite a lot of younger athletes in running, and I was a HYROX coach. That the time I've really struggled is when I've not felt seen or heard, or when I've felt like a little bit alone or disconnected, or not connected to somebody. So I guess my advice would be to just sit there and just to listen, and to create an environment where a younger female athlete feels like they can be themselves, they can make a mistake, that they're not being judged, and that they've got somebody who's literally just gonna like sit in the mud with them and listen,
Mm.
and maybe not offer any advice.
Yeah, almost not try to fix it. Just just be there as a friend, and just, I love that. That's such a good answer. Oh look, we've not had that one, and that is definitely not what I thought. I thought it would be more scientific and more research and more professor-like. But where can everyone? Obviously, we've only just touched the surface. You've done a lot of lectures and a lot of like Q&As and panels. Where can everyone find you to follow you? And then maybe if they've enjoyed this, like try and get to one of your panels or your Q&As or your presentations in the near future.
Yeah, best place is Instagram. So it's just my name, which is obviously Bryna Chrismas. And then just in front of that, I've just got DR for doctor. So it's just at Dr Bryna Chrismas on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, absolutely appreciate your time today. Appreciate everything you're doing. And if we can ever help or pass things on to our listeners, or we can help ourselves, or you've got something coming up and you want to come back on an episode to explain what you're doing or any research you found, we would love to have you back. But yeah, really appreciate it, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it, and look forward to coming to one of your Q&As or your panels or one of your chats soon as well. And good luck for the races.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been so nice talking to you both, and hopefully get to speak to you in person, and I'm sure we'll see each other at events or the next coaches summit. And I'd love to keep in contact and share with you whatever I'm doing, and if it can help you and listeners, then that's just exactly what I want to do. That's my purpose.
Win-win. It's good.
Exactly.
Aligned. Purpose is aligned.